Before Christopher Nolan took over the project, director Darren Aronofsky had been hired to adapt the Batman Year One comic book into a film. Frank Miller, the creator of the original comic, was brought on to write the screenplay. By 2003, a draft of the script was completed. However, Warner Brothers ultimately decided not to move forward with the project. Although no official reason was given for the cancellation, leaked information suggests that the script's significant deviation from the source material may have played a role in the decision. In Frank Miller and Aronofsky's version, the story featured several radical changes. For example, the character of Alfred was reimagined as an African-American mechanic named Big Al, and the Batmobile resembled an armored Lincoln Town car. Perhaps most striking of all, Bruce Wayne was portrayed as a homeless man. These drastic differences may have led the studio to view the project as too risky. All of these fascinating details are explored in depth in David Hughes' book, Tales from Development Hell. At one point, the Wachowski siblings were offered the chance to direct a new Batman film. They even wrote their own screenplay based on Frank Miller's Batman Year One comic book. However, they ultimately turned down the offer to focus on The Matrix Reloaded and The Matrix Revolutions instead. The early development of the film's script and production design took place behind Christopher Nolan's garage. During the writing process, Nolan and screenwriter David Goyer would sometimes take walks to the location where the original Batcave set from the 1966 Batman TV series had been filmed, using the walks as creative inspiration. The script was kept under such tight secrecy that even the studio executives who would greenlight the project were only allowed to read it inside Nolan's garage. Initially, the film was referred to as Batman 5, as it was intended to exist in the same continuity as the Tim Burton and Joel Schumacher films. Later, the working title changed to Batman the Frightening, with Scarecrow set to be the main villain. In this version, both the Joker and the Penguin were planned to make eerie returns through hallucinations induced by Scarecrow's fear toxin. To prevent script leaks and mislead the public, the project was initially developed under the fake title The Intimidation Game. Eventually, the filmmakers settled on the official name, Batman Begins. In fact, the secrecy was so intense that even the cast wasn't told they were working on a Batman movie at first. When Michael Caine first read the script, he assumed it was a gangster film. Although Batman Begins marked the Scarecrow's first appearance in a live-action film, the character is one of Batman's oldest foes, dating back to his earliest comic book adventures. Despite being considered for the 1960s Batman TV series, Scarecrow was never used. He was also intended to be the main villain in what would have been the fifth film in the Tim Burton and Joel Schumacher series, but that project was ultimately shelved. Initially, Christopher Nolan envisioned a version of Scarecrow without a mask. However, screenwriter David Goyer convinced him otherwise. Before the final design was chosen, over 20 different prototypes of the Scarecrow's mask were created, each exploring different ways to bring the character's nightmarish persona to life. In the early stages of the film's development, Heath Ledger was briefly considered for the role of Bruce Wayne Batman. However, both Ledger and director Christopher Nolan ultimately agreed that he wasn't the right fit for the character. Ironically, just a few years later, Ledger would go on to play the Joker in The Dark Knight, a performance that not only earned him a posthumous Academy Award but also secured his place in cinema history. Cillian Murphy also auditioned for the role of Batman and even participated in screen tests wearing the full Batsuit. Although the role ultimately went to Christian Bale, Nolan was so impressed with Murphy's performance that he cast him as Dr. Jonathan Crane, aka Scarecrow. Murphy later praised Bale's portrayal of Batman, calling it truly remarkable. Christian Bale's interest in the character began back in 2000 when a friend lent him a copy of Arkham Asylum, the graphic novel by Grant Morrison and David McKean. Deeply affected by its dark psychological take on the Batman mythos, Bale told his agent that if a new Batman movie were ever to be made, he wanted to be part of it. Christian Bale made a bold choice early in the audition process. He decided to play Batman not as a traditional hero, but as a creature fueled by rage, something primal, almost monstrous. Rather than delivering a flat, straightforward performance, he went for a harsher, more intimidating interpretation of the character. Bale thought this might surprise Christopher Nolan, but instead Nolan loved it. The director was intrigued by the intensity and saw great potential in Bale's raw, unfiltered approach. Nolan also wanted to amplify Batman's mystique by showing him more from the criminal's perspective, and by keeping his screen time somewhat limited. "We're going to make him scarier," Nolan explained, which will make the tension even stronger. At the time, however, Bale faced a major physical challenge. Coming off his role in The Machinist, he stood at 6 feet tall and weighed just 121 pounds. For Batman, Nolan wanted him to be as physically imposing as possible. Bale immediately launched into a grueling 6-month regimen of eating and training, eventually bulking up to 220 pounds. But he had overcorrected. The production team jokingly began calling him Fat Man. Realizing he had gone too far, Bale quickly trimmed down, achieving a lean, muscular physique that struck the perfect balance for the role. Looking back, he described the transformation as an unbearable physical ordeal, but one that helped him fully inhabit the Dark Knight's body and presence. Before filming began, Christopher Nolan invited the entire crew to a private screening of Blade Runner. As the credits rolled, he turned to them and said, "This is how we're going to do Batman." It was a bold declaration and a hint at the moody, grounded, and visually immersive world he intended to create. In a fascinating coincidence, Blade Runner's iconic antagonist, Roy Batty, was played by Rutger Hauer, who in Batman Begins would portray corporate villain William Earl. Nolan's vision for the film extended beyond tone and atmosphere, right down to Batman's gear. The Batsuit and gadgets were all rooted in real military technology. One of the most impressive examples was the cape, which wasn't just a dramatic costume piece, but a technical marvel. It was created using an advanced process called electrostatic flocking, originally developed by the UK Ministry of Defence to help materials avoid detection by night vision. To build the cape, nylon parachute fabric was brushed with a special adhesive and coated in tiny synthetic fibers. Then an electrostatic current was passed through the material, giving it a sleek, dark sheen while preserving a textured, almost animal-like quality. And then there was the Batmobile, completely custom-built from the ground up. More tank than car, it measured 2.74 meters wide and 4.87 meters long, and could reach speeds up to 170 kilometers per hour, about 106 miles per hour. Rugged, powerful, and intimidating, it wasn't just a vehicle, it was a statement. The Batmobile, with its imposing frame and tank-like design, didn't come cheap. Its estimated cost was around £500,000. For the production, 5 separate versions of the vehicle were built, each crafted with obsessive attention to detail. The dedication went so far that even excess glue marks commonly found on model kits were deliberately replicated to add authenticity. When it came to designing Gotham's underworld, inspiration was drawn from one of the most chaotic and densely populated urban areas in modern history, the Kowloon-walled city of Hong Kong. This anarchic maze of stacked buildings became the visual blueprint for Gotham's slums, dark, overcrowded, and teeming with danger. Gotham City's police department also reflected a real-world influence. Its blue and white color scheme was modeled after the New York Police Department, further grounding the film in a gritty, realistic aesthetic. This was no coincidence. Gotham itself was originally envisioned by Batman co-creator Bob Kane as a stylized version of New York City. Sir Michael Caine, who played Bruce Wayne's loyal butler Alfred, added a personal touch to the role. To capture Alfred's voice and demeanor, Caine drew inspiration from a military colonel he had known in his youth. He once explained that he based Alfred's tone on that man's voice, seeing Alfred's loyalty to Bruce not just as that of a servant, but as a kind of deep, unshakable military brotherhood. Gary Oldman joined the cast of Batman Begins under unusual circumstances. He accepted the role of Jim Gordon without even reading the script. In fact, he was the last major actor to sign on and memorized his lines on a plane en route to the set. Originally, director Christopher Nolan had considered Oldman for a villainous role. But when Chris Cooper, Nolan's initial choice for Gordon, dropped out, Oldman was recast as Gotham's most steadfast cop. On the first day of shooting, Christian Bale suited up as Batman for the very first time and stayed in the costume for the entire day to get used to it. Keeping the Batsuit spotless was a challenge in itself. Bale had 2 crew members assigned solely to maintain its pristine condition at all times. Despite the impressive look of the suit, Bale found it incredibly uncomfortable to wear, tight, hot, and restrictive. Ironically, that discomfort ended up enhancing his performance. The constant physical tension helped fuel Batman's sense of barely contained rage and brooding intensity. Bale later admitted that he felt irritable and agitated whenever he wore the suit, which naturally fed into the Dark Knight's psychological edge. His commitment came at a cost, though. He lost his voice 3 times during filming due to the gravelly, forceful tone he used to portray Batman. Batman Begins is also unique within Nolan's trilogy for being the only film to use the flash fight technique, a rapid-cut editing style designed to heighten the chaos and confusion of close-quarters combat. Christopher Nolan chose to use the flash fight technique in Batman Begins to emphasize Batman's speed and brutal efficiency in combat, rather than clearly showing every punch and kick. The method focused on the aftermath, allowing audiences to feel the impact more than see it. Blows landed in a blur, giving the impression that Batman moved faster than the eye could follow. It heightened his presence as a near mythical figure, striking from the shadows and vanishing just as quickly. However, this stylistic choice was unique to the first film. It was dropped in the sequels in favor of more grounded, choreographed action. Nolan also pushed for realism in the fight scenes by having the actors perform as much of the physical action as possible, without relying on stunt doubles. Christian Bale and Liam Neeson performed nearly all of their fight sequences themselves. In fact, each scene was also filmed with stunt doubles, just in case. But Bale's intense physicality and commitment made most of the backup footage unnecessary. To prepare, Bale studied training tapes to memorize complex fight choreography. Thanks to his strong visual memory and relentless discipline, he was able to pick up movements quickly and convincingly. Throughout the film, he appeared in a total of 16 distinct fight scenes, each showcasing a different aspect of Batman's combat style: precise, aggressive, and utterly relentless. Real bats were used only in scenes featuring 1 or 2, like those in Wayne Manor. For large swarms, digital effects were necessary, as controlling so many live bats was nearly impossible. Likewise, the wide shots of the League of Shadows temple were entirely CGI. Unlike previous Batman films that used matte paintings or VFX for the Batcave, Batman Begins featured a full-scale practical set, creating a more immersive, realistic atmosphere. During filming in Chicago's Lower Wacker Drive, Batmobile handling was so cautious, especially in reverse, that it caused traffic jams, even making the news. In one bizarre incident, a drunk driver crashed into the Batmobile, later claiming he thought it was an alien vehicle. Thankfully, no major damage occurred. Despite the film's dark tone, Christopher Nolan aimed to make it accessible to a wider audience. "It might be intense for very young kids, but I didn't want to exclude older children," he said, explaining the decision to avoid graphic violence. For the music, Nolan brought in Hans Zimmer, who suggested collaborating with James Newton Howard. The 2 composers blended their talents to reflect Batman's duality, crafting a powerful and emotionally rich score. Hans Zimmer named several tracks in the Batman Begins score after bat species. Tracks 4 to 9, Barbastella, Artibeus, Tadarida, Macrotus, Anthrozous, and Nycteris spell Batman. Ras Al Ghul means head of the demon in Arabic, referencing his leadership of the League of Shadows. Though Al Ghul can mean ghoul, it's often interpreted as demon. The frozen lake duel between Bruce and Raz was filmed on real ice. During shooting, the ice cracked underfoot. By the next day, the lake had completely melted. Bruce drives a Lamborghini Murcielago in the film. Murcielago means bat in Spanish. Interestingly, this was the first Batman film released in Latin America where Bruce Wayne wasn't renamed Bruno Diaz. At release, Forbes estimated it would cost $3.5 million to be Batman. In 2006, Bruce Wayne was listed as the seventh richest fictional character with a net worth of $6.8 billion. Despite a global box office of $375 million, the film's high marketing $100 million and production $150 million costs meant it barely broke even, making little to no actual profit. And that brings us to the end of the video. Thanks so much for watching. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next one. Take care.